Hunt, fish, listen, repeat. Broadcasting from the Tazen Lake Lodge Studios. This is Sporting Journal Radio. Presented by OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. Now here's your host, Brett Amundson. Welcome to the show. I'm Brett Amundson. Thank you for tuning in on this station right here, or by watching this, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, wherever, or downloading the podcast, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. It feels weird to be saying this still, but we hope you and your family are safe right now and, enjoying life. I hope you had a good holiday. I hope you had a good Christmas. Hope you have a good New Year surrounded by friends and family, and everybody is doing well, because as we keep hearing, it seems like in the fishing world, we keep losing people. So hopefully you and yours are safe and healthy. We are going to talk a lot of fishing this week, and we're also going to talk about health. Dan Amundson is right over there, by the way. Dan, how you doing?
Hey, doing all right.
We won some awards with AGLOW, the Association of Great Lakes Outdoor Writers, in September, some podcast awards. And like last week over the Christmas holiday, we replayed one of the interviews that we did that won an award, and we're going to do that again this week. This one is about Lyme disease. This was a huge show for us. Lyme disease is... I don't want to say it's a controversial topic, but there's some controversy regarding treatment and diagnosis of Lyme disease. It's a bad deal. A lot of people, maybe you either know somebody that's had it or has it, or have dealt with a dog that's had it or has it. And we're going to talk to three people that have been affected by it. We're going to replay this interview with three people, including Kelley Foss, who had a pretty tough battle with Lyme disease. Still deals with it. Also, Pete Nichols, who went through a tough situation with it, still deals with it. And Joe Henry, whose wife deals with it on a daily basis. So we'll have that coming up in just a little bit. And we're going to get a fishing report from Joe Henry and talk about a few other things with Joe here in just a couple of minutes. Get a Lake of the Woods fishing report. Dan, who's this show brought to us by this week?
Yeah, this week's show is brought to us by Haybale Heights Campground and Resort on Devil's Lake. Plan a trip to Devil's Lake at haybaleheights.com. Ottertail Lakes Country, find your inner otter at ottertaillakescountry.com. Lake of the Woods Tourism, plan a trip to Lake of the Woods at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. Tazen Lake Lodge, plan a trip of a lifetime to catch giant lake trout and pike at tazenlake.com. OnX Hunt, know where you stand with OnX. Mid-Migration Outfitters, rent one of our fish houses or start thinking about spring snow geese. Visit midmigrationoutfitters.com for more. And Prairie Sportsman, watch episodes anytime at prairiesportsman.org.
Ice fishing season is here. This winter, plan a trip to Devil's Lake, North Dakota. Not only will you have the chance to catch their legendary perch, but this year, Haybale Heights has been catching big walleye after big walleye. And they're doing it from a mobile, comfortable snow bear. No matter how cold it is outside, you're warm and toasty on the inside. Learn more and book a trip today at haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com. 852 million acres of public land, 147 million private properties, all in the palm of your hand. The #1 hunting GPS app just got better. With hundreds of custom map layers, 3D and topographic maps, you can easily scout on the road or at home before you go. And now you can get important weather details, CWD detection, and even know what crops have been planted where. Get the most trusted hunting GPS app ever made. OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. All right, it's time to talk to Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods Tourism to get a Lake of the Woods fishing report now here on the show. Joe, how are you doing?
Hey, happy holidays, everybody. Yeah, it's tell you what, if you're an ice angler, you like snowmobiling, it's really a pretty neat time of the year.
It's a neat time. It's an interesting time. There's been a lot of sadness in the fishing world, I know, around the region. And I know something hit close to home for you. So my condolences for your situation, Joe.
Yeah, if you follow the fishing world, we've had a lot of, anglers who have passed away recently. We have just a number of people in the fishing industry. And this week I lost my fishing partner, somebody I fished tournaments with, I fished league with, my cousin, of course, one of my best friends. And, it's hard. And it was COVID related, it's hard to fathom what life looks like without such a good friend who you spend so much time with. So my heart truly goes out to everybody who is hurting because of a loss or because of somebody that has an illness. But I think the bottom line is we have to really appreciate what we have and who we have in life, because life is short, as they say, and sometimes it hits pretty close to home, and it's a toughie. But I just give everybody the I guess strength to carry on. Whatever your faith is, that certainly can help, and just a tough time, like you say.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I've been fortunate in that sense, and so I'm sorry to hear that you're going through that, and of course that person's family and friends, and then everybody else that we've lost so far this year. This year you want to just talk about ice safety and being careful when you're out there fishing, and when you have to deal with something like this pandemic that's still going on. I was really hoping we'd be done with it by now. So again, my condolences. And when it comes to that ice safety, at least on some of these lakes, like Lake of the Woods, it sounds like we're starting to make some pretty good ice.
Yeah, we sure are. Well, we've had cold temps, and we've had, not a lot of snow. So consequently, that formula really is good for making good ice. And, whenever I talk about ice on Lake of the Woods, I always got to be careful, because Lake of the Woods is so big that the ice conditions can vary from one part of the ice to the other part of the ice. So it's never across the board. But I'll tell you what, when it comes to ice fishing Lake of the Woods, we do have some of our ice roads now that are allowing half-ton vehicles out, wheelhouses. I mean, it's game on up at Lake of the Woods. Again, I always check with whichever ice road operator you're going out of to find out what their weight restrictions are. But I tell you, things are coming along nicely. Bombers are running in a certain part of the lakes, bombardiers. It's game on.
I did see... I want to talk about the angle for just a second, Joe. I did see a post about being a little careful when you're up there in between the islands because of current up there.
Yeah, well, that's every year, all year, in the winter, because Lake of the Woods, it's ultimately a river system. The Rainy River flows in from the south, and then that water flows north on the lake, and then it starts flowing northeast, and that water goes through Kenora, which is the northeast part of the lake where the dam is, and then the water flows into the Winnipeg River, through Lake Winnipeg, and eventually up to Hudson Bay, where the polar bears are. But that water is flowing, so every year, when you get up to those island areas, there are certain neck down areas or shallow areas where that current can cause unsafe ice conditions. But that's in the heart of the winter, too. It's nothing new. But consequently, and the reason this post came up from the Northwest Angle Edge Riders Snowmobile Club is, when they're doing their grooming on the trails that are marked and staked, and they know there's good ice, they've noticed that there are some people traveling in areas that notoriously are bad ice areas, and they're concerned. So they put out a really nice post with graphics and everything else, just tipping people off to some of the areas around the resorts anyway that typically have poor ice conditions because of current. And then, of course, for people that slide over into Ontario and fish on your own, man, you really have to be careful. Things you got to be careful about. Current areas. There's some real deep areas that I was told they don't freeze over real good. If you see a snowmobile track, don't just assume you can follow that snowmobile track and you're going to be okay, because that might have been a guide who knows the area and was going 90 miles an hour over a thin ice area, knowing what he's doing or what she's doing. I mean, you just got to be careful. And that's why we always say, know what you're doing, go out on a resort staked road, or be with a guide, or at least really be dialed in on that ice conditions and know where not to go. Because there's a lot of things that could get you in trouble. It's just a safety message, but it's every single year, even on the cold years.
And the snowmobile trail to get up to the Northwest Angle from the south end is good. That is open and staked, and people can take that. There's a runway. People can fly up to the angle. Of course, you can you get the negative test and have your shots, and you can drive up there, correct?
Yes, yep, you can, and you can also take the Lake of the Woods passenger service, which is a bombardier service. They'll take you up the round trip on along the staying in Minnesota. So Lake Country Air, Lake of the Woods passenger service, and the snowmobile trails are all three really good ways to get up there and stay in Minnesota and not deal with customs. If you want to drive up to the angle, you got to go 40 miles through Canada. If you're vaccinated, not a big deal. You just have to you download the Arrive Can app, and then you upload your vaccination card, and then you got to have a COVID test that's less than 72 hours old that's either a PCR or molecular test showing a negative result. We just opened up. We got for people that maybe didn't get their test before they go into the Northwest Angle. We have a location, Thrifty White in Baudette, that Monday through Friday will do rapid tests that are molecular of PCR. They qualify to go into Canada. And then over in Warroad now we have another location that just opened up this week, and they also do the testing right on the spot. I think the tests are about $100 in Baudette for on the spot test. I think they're $125 in Warroad. But then what most people do is they take that receipt, turn it into insurance, and in many cases they'll get it reimbursed.
And now I've heard talk about a new an ice road again being built up there.
Well, so what it is one of the businesses, Points North Services up at the Northwest Angle, they were very instrumental, along with the resorts last year, in keeping that Northwest Angle guest ice road open. They're taking a look at it this year, and they're taking a look at everything from what kind of need they think there is, what do ice conditions look like heading into January, how much extra work would it be, and they're just looking at everything, trying to decide if they should do it or not. They're kind of on the fence right now, just watching things. Okay. There is a chance that they plow. There's a chance they might not plow a road. Again, they're just kind of monitoring the situation, and time will tell. But either way, we have other ways to go up. And of course, if they would do that ice road, that would be another really good way to go up too. And we would certainly let everybody know if that would happen.
Well, we've all seen the video of Greg Jones catching that big sturgeon through the ice. And that would be a lot of fun. How has fishing been up there lately, Joe?
What? It's been good. I just shot a show with Greg Jones, actually, a Midwest Outdoors TV show, and we were out of the south end of the lake. We were in about 26 feet of water, 27 feet of water, 26, 27 feet. And just like our fishing report has said, we rifled through a lot of fish. I mean, we caught a lot of fish. I mean, there was fish on our screen all the darn time. So what we do is we catch a lot of small fish, and we just work through them, and then we'd get our keepers in between. Oh, hey, this is a nice one, and then, of course, we hooked a nice eel pout. And can you believe I'm saying nice eel pout? Those two words go together?
They do these days, for sure.
We were saying that, how times have changed. And then we caught a big jumbo perch, too, big, about a 13 and a quarter inch jumbo, big, fat perch. So, you're getting mixed in. I got a tulby. But, man, what a fun day of fishing. We caught all the fish we needed. We're putting keeper saugers back. We caught one slot walleye that was just a little over 20 inches, I think. But, man, what a fun day of fishing. Just a lot of action. And that's kind of the way it's been overall. It's always fishing. But, boy, people have been going through a lot of fish, and that's the fun of it. Are you catching are you jigging, or are you getting them on the dead stick? A little both? Both. A little both, yep. So we were jigging. Greg put on a rip and wrap for a while. He was whacking them on that. I put on I think I had a red and pink glow macho minnow, a small macho minnow with a minnow head or a piece of minnow tail, stop sign, pink charmers for jigging lines. The glow colors have been working really good. And then, of course, for the dead stick, we've been using, sometimes a plain hook with a live minnow 6 inches to a foot off. Sometimes I put on I was using a demon, which is just a glow in the dark, almost like a crappie lure. And that really holds that glow color, and that stained water of Lake of the Woods, that glow color can really be awesome. It can really get some more fish. People that are using a plain hook, in fact, will oftentimes use a glow hook just to have a little bit of extra glow there. Sometimes makes the difference between that walleye or sauger eating and not eating. So, man, just a fun bite, though. Gosh, it's fun to get back out there and watch those waters go down, to see the fish come in on the Vexlars, whatever. Just really a good feeling.
Well, I'm starting to get into the mood of ice fishing, Joe. I just bought a bunch of new ice fishing gear and finally breaking my stuff out of storage. So I think it's about time. Now that the hunting season is finally about over, I can start thinking about ice fishing. So I'm excited to get up there. And Joe, people want to learn more about where they can stay, where they can go, how they can travel up at Lake of the Woods. What should they do?
Current conditions, check out the Lake of the Woods Tourism Facebook page or any of our resort Facebook pages. And as far as lodging, fish house rentals, sleeper houses, that sort of thing, check out our website. And that is lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
So obviously you can hear that I've got dogs. Can you tell if lodges are pet friendly on your website by any chance?
You know what? Most lodges have lodging that are pet friendly. You just got to inquire if those cabins are open or not.
Perfect. All right. And again, my condolences, Joe. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Looking for winter adventure? Might as well pick a place with over 1,000 lakes. Otter Tail County, Minnesota is in the middle of everywhere, offers a simpler pace, and has something for everyone. Find your inner otter at ottertaillakescountry.com.
If you've ever walked around through the woods in this area, in this region, you're probably well aware of ticks. Maybe you pulled them off your dog. They're literally one of the reasons I don't get excited about turkey hunting in the spring. I was hunting in North Dakota one year. I sat down next to a tree. I must have sat right on a nest. And I pulled so many ticks off, I stopped counting when I got to 100. And that's when I said, okay, this is, I'm not sure if turkey hunting is for me necessarily. But in all reality, it's not the bug that bothers me so much. It's what happens, what could happen if you're bit, the possibility of Lyme disease. I've watched dogs struggle with it. I've heard stories about how debilitating it can be. Singer Avril Lavigne, of all people, she might be more well-known to parts in my world, the people in my world, more with their affliction with Lyme disease than her singing career. If treated quickly, Lyme disease can be managed. If it's not, or if it's misdiagnosed, complications could continue for many years. Why are there so many misdiagnoses? Some doctors even deny its existence, but why? A few minutes of searching the internet will bring up everything from symptoms to conspiracy theories. And I hope to get a doctor on the show. I was unable to get doctors to come on the show because I wanted to get some people in the medical profession. What I do have, however, are a few people that I know who will tell you that Lyme disease is very real. And we're going to find out how it's affecting them, how they're dealing with it, how their experiences with the medical community has gone, and now how COVID may have made this whole situation worse. First off, we have a friend of mine who I've known for a long time. We played a lot of sports in high school together. We almost got a fight in sixth grade or fifth grade or something like that.
I think sixth is right. Yeah.
A fight that I probably would have lost. And also share a love of music and photography. It's Pete Nichols, who's a PhD and a former philosophy professor. Pete, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Brett.
We also have Kelley Foss with us today. Kelley has been dealing with Lyme disease for a few years now and told me that he was really sick in 2017. Kelley, thanks for being on the show as well.
Yep, thank you.
And then, of course, Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods Tourism. Joe, it's going to be weird to have you on the show and not talk about walleyes.
It's going to be hard. But I think I can resist for this topic.
Joe, it's actually her wife that has Lyme disease. How is she doing?
Yeah, she's struggling, quite frankly. Yeah, she's had it for quite a long time and really struggles with it. It's quite debilitating.
Well, I want to talk to you guys. I want to go to the beginning. I want to talk about how you discovered, that you had Lyme disease. And Kelley, let's start with you. What do you remember about your first experience? Do you remember a tick bite, a rash? How did you discover this?
It's a long and confusing story, but I'll give you the short. Basically, it started after an elk hunting trip out to Montana. Grueling trip, and ran into a couple grizzly bears. Very, very, very close encounters. Never been that scared in my life. And the reason I tell you that part is things progressed almost instantly from that day forward. The theory was that I was already infected. It may have been hiding in my system. I may have been fighting it, but that surge of adrenaline possibly could have purged it into my system and weakened me to a point where it just kind of started taking over. shortly in the weeks after, I started getting a debilitating headache. I've heard of migraines, never really experienced them. I've talked to people with them, and this was much worse than anybody ever described. I physically couldn't move. Within a month or two, I was having full-blown seizures, fatigue to where I couldn't even physically get out of bed or walk across the living room at points. And from there, we just started going to doctor after doctor after doctor, and they would check my blood. They'd check all my levels. Everything looked normal except for maybe slight vitamin deficiencies. Vitamin D would drop off the charts. They couldn't figure out why that was happening. Went to neurologists, and they all basically were trying to tell me that I was depressed, even though I felt like I was living my best life, you know. And it got to the point where my wife and I were kind of giving up hope that we were going to figure out what it was. The doctors just kept throwing medication after medication on me, a lot of it antidepressants, which made me feel worse, compounded all the symptoms I was having. And luckily, a friend on Facebook reached out, and he says, you know, man, I have a sinking suspicion you have Lyme disease. He says, have you been tested for it? And I said, 3 or 4 times I had Lyme disease tests before that, and they all came back negative or inconclusive. And he explained to me that that does not mean you don't have Lyme disease, even though the doctors were telling me that I absolutely didn't. With a little research, you'll find out that the false negative rates on Lyme disease tests are very high, to the point where I don't know that I would even recommend taking them to a point, because, or if you go and just, you have to know that there is a possibility that it is a false negative, and you just can't give up on it. So through a process of elimination, we checked for all the major ones that could cause some types of these symptoms and cross those all off the list. And that buddy that reached out to me, he sent me to a doctor, a Lyme literate doctor, actually the doctor that you were going to have on the show today. And when we went to that first meeting with her, my wife literally had to physically carry me into her office. I couldn't use my legs or arms anymore. And at that point, they basically said, we're going to have to do a clinical diagnosis. She says, you've ruled out every other cause that these symptoms could be. And she says, I am 99.9% sure that you have Lyme disease and co-infections. Went and got a second opinion from 2 other doctors, Lyme literate doctors, and they all agreed that I was dealing with Lyme disease, Bartonella, Babesia, and later, after I started treatment, I developed a Candida overgrowth from all the antibiotics I was on, which is a whole nother ballgame of trying to fight that as well. That's kind of short version. There's a lot of other little things in there, but that's how it started. It started with just your regular old headache that got really, really, really bad.
Pete, do you remember, is that how it kind of went for you too? You had symptoms and they kind of went backwards, or do you remember getting bit by a tick or anything like that?
Excuse me, a lot of similarities with Kelley's story. So I had kind of a history of tick bites. First of all, I grew up in the woods, and I was playing out in the woods as a kid. And then 2009, I had a deer tick. I found a deer tick that was embedded in me, and I didn't develop a rash or anything. And we're going to find out that doesn't mean much. No acute symptoms at that time. 2015, I did find a deer tick, and I did develop a rash. I got on antibiotics right away, and this was just a 2-week course, which is pretty common. That you go on back up a little bit. If you develop a rash, Western medicine, that's no test is needed. They consider that it's actually much more reliable than a test. The test that they use to diagnose Lyme. And fortunately, my doc recognized the rash as Lyme disease. The rash does not always present as a bullseye, and there are some docs who do not know that and will not diagnose it as Lyme disease. On that, you can do a quick search. Even the CDC has several different images of what a Lyme rash can look like. Now, there's a very recent update to their website, and in some cases, no rash presents at all. Anyway, excuse me. Early June 2015, I had the rash. I got 2 weeks of antibiotics. 3 to 4 is better, but I think I had 3 weeks actually. That cleared up the acute symptoms at the time, which were fever and headaches and malaise. I have a history of chronic fatigue and some other symptoms, all kind of associated with the endocrine system, going back to 2001. That's kind of its own mystery. I don't know if any of that is tick related, but in 2015, the acute symptoms resolved completely within about a month to 2 months. And then I was in better shape I was in decent shape for roughly a year. And it was about August of 2016, I just sort of fell off a cliff out of nowhere. And this was the only sense I've been able to make of this was exactly what Kelley was talking about, where I suspect I had some one of two things. Either I had a reactivation. They call it a reactivation because the Lyme pathogen, it's a spirochete, Borrelia burgdorferi. That's the name of the main one, the main strain. If you never really kill it off, even if you get it earlier with antibiotics, you put it in a dormancy. It can go into a cyst form, and it can lay dormant perhaps the rest of your life if you're lucky, or it can lay dormant for a while and it can reactivate under a period of high stress. So I suspect I either had a reactivation or else I got it's possible that I got another bite, possibly from a nymph that didn't leave a rash that I never detected at the time. But since 2016, I've been in decline, and the new symptoms, I was already dealing with some health problems prior to that. As I mentioned, I already dealt with chronic fatigue. I had a head injury that never healed, and so I had some mild headaches, light and sound sensitivity. And the light and sound sensitivity I've since discovered are major symptoms of tick-borne diseases. And that gives me suspicion that I may have had something going on prior even to 2015. But after 2015, I started developing muscle weakness. I started having trouble walking, and this is without any muscle atrophy. And I'm just kind of genetically, my build I'm muscular, and so this was made no sense. It can only the only way to make sense of it is a neurological weakness, and weakness on my arms. On bad days, it was so bad I couldn't hold up my camera or my binoculars, and the brain fog was another new symptom. I was a professor at University of St. Thomas, Foss professor, and I was able to keep teaching another year. End of 2017. After that semester, I had to give it up, and I went from writing, publishing papers in academic journals on extremely difficult topics to days when I couldn't write an email because I couldn't just formulating the words was so difficult. And I mean, this is something I was an expert in, and it didn't matter. So the brain fog, the muscle weakness, the light and sound sensitivity, which I suspect are from a tick-borne disease, because they kind of came in not immediately after my head injury. They came in sometime later. That's kind of a different story I don't want to get into. Extreme fatigue, as Kelley was saying, to the point that on some days I can't get out of bed, or I can't get out of bed until halfway through the afternoon. It's a long list, and other less, occasional minor symptoms. But I was going to write a list before this of all my symptoms, and I ended up kind of having a rough day yesterday. I didn't get it done, but because I can't even remember them all. There's so many.
Yep.
Joel, let's talk about your situation and your wife. Do you remember a tick bite in her situation?
Yeah, so my wife Leah grew up in Pequot Lakes, and growing up as a kid, one of her jobs was to take the ticks off the dogs, and never thought anything of it. Ticks were just part of life up there, and she was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which is kind of a catch-all. If you can't figure out what's going on, it's fibromyalgia, right? So to make a long story short, we've been married about 11 years, and about a year and a half after we were married, we went to Mexico, and Leah was in good health. I mean, she was working out, and she had fibromyalgia and some other ailments, but she was functioning very well. And of all things, she got bit by a spider down in Mexico, and what we think happened is she had Lyme in her system, and that spider accelerated the dormant Lyme, which she didn't know she had, and she fell off a cliff. I think, Pete, is kind of what you said, but same thing happened. So when she started getting these crazy symptoms, a lot of pain, headaches, just a little bit of brain fog, we didn't know what they were from. We went to numerous specialists. We went to neurologists and back specialists for the pain, and we went MRIs and CT scans, and the University of Minnesota. We went all over the place. Finally, we went to a homeopathic, and I was a little bit leery because I wasn't really familiar with homeopathic, and of course none of that's covered by insurance. It's all out of pocket, and so they did a test on her where they put a small current through your body. They wet your hand, and they have you hold a metal probe, and they take another metal probe and touch different parts of your body, almost like Eastern medicine, where different parts of your feet or hands relate to different organs and different things in your body. And they did this test, and they said, well, Leah, it looks like you have a Rocky Mountain spotted tick, which is a form of Lyme disease. And Leah, her comment was, well, I don't think that's it, because I've been tested many, many times at the hospital for Lyme disease, and it always shows negative. And what we come to learn is that, when you get tested at the hospital or through modern medicine, they only detect about 50% or less of the different strains of Lyme disease. So it's a very, very inconsistent test. If you get tested at the hospital, if it picks it up, well, you certainly have it. But if it doesn't pick it up, that doesn't mean you don't have it. There's additional testing. So I was leery because of the homeopathic thing I wasn't used to at the time. So there's two big blood laboratories, both coasts, very, very thorough blood laboratories, kind of expensive. But we sent her blood out to, I think it was called iGenix, which is out in the West Coast in California. And they sent back the results saying, yes, you do have Lyme disease. So since then, I was like, okay, cool, because now we know what it is. Now we can treat it, not realizing that if you give Lyme disease a 30-year head start, you might have a little bit of an issue. And so since then, we've been to homeopathics, regular MDs, naturopaths. Leah actually went to Germany and visited Dr. Weitzel, who's pretty world-renowned in Lyme disease treatment, and she still struggles. I mean, some of the things we've done have helped her at times, but she doesn't drive anymore. Pretty much home-ridden, most days bedridden. Her symptoms would be everything from a lot of pain to sensitivity to light, brain fog, intermittent sleep patterns. Sleeps 2-3 hours at a time, not real deep. Has a hard time remembering, high anxiety, just really has, changed her life. And, we continue to treat Lyme disease for her. And, we're hoping that we're going to get to a point where she can get a better handle on it and live more of a normal life anyway.
Pete, you traveled to Florida. How did that experience go?
Yeah, so this I went to Florida for a 5-week treatment program. This was a unconventional treatment, even for Lyme, because all of the conventional treatments have failed me. I didn't tolerate after beginning of 2018 or 2019. Actually, I went on antibiotics for chronic Lyme, which is you have to take a combo of 2 to 3 different antibiotics to knock out not only the active spirochetes, but that it develops a biofilm like plaque that helps to protect the spirochetes. So you have to take a different antibiotic for that, and generally another one for the cysts, which are the dormant forms of Lyme that can reactivate at any point. At that, I tolerated antibiotics fine in 2015. When I tried them again in 2019, I had a bad reaction, and I tried a different. We mixed it up once, tried a different mix. It didn't help, so I kind of gave up on that. By that point, I had already tried a couple of different herbal protocols that are out there. You can find them online, or there's a couple books about various herbs that are a number of people have had success with in treating Lyme. Florida was an unusual clinic. Their focus there was they did a lot of IV therapy with vitamins, minerals, amino acids. They worked on some kind of graded exercise therapy where they work on just very, very gradually increasing your tolerance for exercise, which in some cases might just be walking to the end of the driveway and back. And kind of working with you on improving your supplement protocol. They do a lot of detailed lab work to find out exactly, where things are going wrong. Some people have with Lyme developed problems detoxifying properly. Their liver gets overloaded, and or their spleen, especially if they have babesia. And in my case, those showed up okay, but very long story short, both my central nervous system and autonomic nervous system were just fried. It showed up in my lab work. And my endocrine system, there were multiple problems. And my immune system they told me I developed an autoimmune response, which is not uncommon with chronic Lyme. Some people develop an autoimmune response with that. One of the severe symptoms that I developed just in the last year and a half that I haven't mentioned is chills. And I'm talking extreme chills, far worse than anything I've ever had with a fever. And these are chills without a fever. They just kind of come and go. They have some kind of neurological basis. There's some kind of imbalance in my brain that's telling my body that I am extremely cold when I'm in room temperature, or even outside in 80-something degrees, where I sometimes have to wear multiple layers, long sleeve. The program helped with the chills immediately. The IVs, they had something in there that was balancing out this problem. But once I was done there, the chills came back, and I didn't notice any progress with any of my other symptoms. The one thing that this program did give me quite a bit of help with was in starting to get me off of some meds. They got me and because as they conventional medicine, they're reluctant to diagnose Lyme disease, or they just don't diagnose it. You'll get misdiagnoses. You'll get put on medications, which at best they may help with some of the symptoms, but in the long run, they generally cause more problems than they resolve. especially if you're on multiple medications. It's a lot of stress on your liver, and they can exacerbate things like insomnia. And so they got me off one of the meds that was causing me the most problems, and they got my levels down on about 4 more meds, with sort of a program going forward from here on out after finishing up there on kind of how to titrate down. That over time, I think, may help, not necessarily with the disease itself, but it'll help remove a complicating factor that has made some of my symptoms worse with some of these medications. And I don't think I ultimately benefited from the program in terms of actually tackling the disease head on, or other diseases, like Bartonella as well, possibly Babesia. But I think in getting me past a lot of psychological obstacles in lowering meds and fear of withdrawal and such, that, and just kind of starting to go through that process, realizing that it wasn't going to kill me, and that I can continue doing this on my own back home. I think down the road, at least a few months down the road, that will start to pay off to some extent. Just being off, just reducing my medication load, yes, can help with some of the symptoms. I'm hopeful for that anyway.
Kelley, you were misdiagnosed, you said, a number of times. What were they telling you?
Just about every time it came down to depression. That's all they could say, is because it was a mental illness. We checked off everything else that it could have been, like ALS, all the big major ones that have basically the same symptoms. That they call Lyme disease the great imitator, because it will present itself in so many different ways and so many different people that look like a lot of other diseases. So it was basically just making sure that it wasn't those, where we can test for those and we would know. And basically that's all they came down to was antibiotics, and hand me a jar full of pills and send me on my way with no follow-ups or anything, kind of just leaving me on my own. And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, talk about 2017 and what you were feeling that year.
2017, leading up to the elk hunt, it was my first backcountry elk hunt. I was eating much healthier, drinking a lot less beer, exercising. But I still felt like I wasn't hitting my mark. Like something was always kind of dragging me back. And I thought, well, I'm mid-30s, haven't always been in the best of shape. I figured it was just going to take me a while. Looking back now and knowing what I can accomplish these days doing the same thing, I believe I was definitely infected then. And then that elk hunt came. It was physically grueling. And then when I say the grizzly bear thing, it was bad. It's as close as you can get without getting scratched.
Yeah, what happened? Tell us the grizzly bear story.
We got there day one, hiked in 8 or 9 miles, set up our little 2-man tent, and went out glassing. On our way back to the tent at dusk, where you don't need a headlamp, but you can barely see. And I see this dark figure cross about 50 yards in front of us. And I look over to my partner and said, "Hey, I think that's a grizzly bear." And he goes, "What?" And giant mammoth of a shadow. And I said, that's definitely a grizzly bear. And so I pulled out my sidearm. He got out his bear spray, and I figured I'm just going to let this bear know that we're in the area. And I said, "Hey, bear. Hey, bear." And on that second "hey, bear," its ears perked up. It looked straight at us and took off on a dead charge right for us. At about 15 yards, I was squeezing that trigger, but never fired. The bear put on the brakes, and jumped into a pile of brush and just sat there and huffed at us. That was scary. Not the end of the world. Except our tent was 400 yards away, and we had to spend the night knowing there was a grizzly right in the area. Long story short, we got up the next day, said, it was a fluke deal. We ran into the bear ran into us. We weren't going to give up on day one. We headed out and hiked, I think, 15 miles heading back to the tent. And we were walking into a avalanche chute meadow clearing. And when you get into these open areas, you kind of let your guard down for a second. You just feel a little safer. As soon as I let my guard down, you heard that noise that you never want to hear, that grizzly growl. And it was right there. I spun around, and about 20 yards, this bear is coming full speed. I had no time to get my firearm out. And me and my partner, we kind of split and separated. And I think that's when the bear realized there was two of us. And it ran within spitting distance and changed course slightly and ran right past me. At that moment, I thought we were dead. There was nothing we could have done. This 900-pound animal coming screaming out of the brush out of nowhere. I've never felt adrenaline like that in my life. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, fall over, or what. But it was only day 2, and we're on a 10-day trip. And the realization of this is a little hairier than we expected set in. And that's when the problems started. I didn't notice it right then, but 2 days later was when the headaches started coming in, and we thought maybe it was altitude sickness. Nobody else was getting sick, but that altitude can affect everyone a little differently. But when I got back home, it never went away, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And how long I had it before then, I don't know. I'm your average Midwest country boy. I grew up in the woods, pulling thousands of ticks off me over the years. Never once thought about Lyme disease the entire time. You heard of it, but you never really gave it two thoughts unless you know someone that has it.
So you think that encounter with a grizzly bear is stressed your body and activated Lyme disease within your body?
I've had 3 Lyme doctors tell me that is a very good indicator of what happened.
Man, so looking back now, are you? This is kind of a weird question, but are you more fearful of Lyme disease or that grizzly bear?
Lyme disease, 100%. What I know now, had I known years prior, this is not something anybody wants to deal with. If you don't have the support around you, I don't know how somebody would even survive this. Lyme disease.
You told me that you weren't sure that you were going to survive in 2017.
Yeah, there were months I laid on the couch or in bed feeling like I was fighting for my life every second of the day. It was relentless. I was having electrical shocks running through my arms and my fingers and my brain that would send me into a seizure-like episode. They weren't what you would call a seizure because I was awake and coherent the whole time, but I couldn't control my body. My hands and arms would atrophy to where they were stuck like this all the time. If it wasn't for my wife, I know for a fact I wouldn't be here, whether it was by my own doing or the disease finally just... The disease itself usually doesn't kill you. It will cause something else to fail, your heart, or I've heard of guys developing cancer out of nowhere because your immune system is fighting nonstop, that it allows other things to come in and just take hold. Without my wife by my side, there's not a chance I would have made it through it. She didn't give up, and she wouldn't let me give up.
Joe, that's something that you can probably relate to, being there for your wife as she's gone through this. Are some of these symptoms, does that sound similar to what your wife has told you?
Yeah. In fact, Kelley, what you just said, my wife woke up one night when we didn't know that it was Lyme disease, but she had the symptoms. And while we're going through the process of trying to figure out what's going on, she woke me up and her arms were curled in almost like MS. Mm-hmm. And you want to talk about scary, but and I think the other thing too is, my heart goes out to you guys because I know what you're dealing with, because I live with it every day with my wife, although I don't have to walk through it. And, I think the other thing is, there's a term in the Lyme world called Lyme Loonies. Mm-hmm. And where Lyme Loonies comes from is there was somebody at I think a medical facility or a hospital, pretty well-known one, that in a behind-the-scenes email, he says, well, if I just wouldn't have to deal with all these Lyme Loonies anymore, life would be a lot easier. Well, so it kind of became a tagline for people that have Lyme disease, that all of us Lyme Loonies. And, the figure that people use is somebody with their eyes real big and bloodshot and their hair's messed up. And it's because of all the symptoms that Lyme causes. It's just so hard. And, I want to say that, a lot of people question Lyme disease, and they question people that have Lyme disease. Is this something psychological? Is this something else? And, for a Lyme person, when your medical provider, who maybe isn't real familiar with Lyme, hears of other people and their exact same symptoms, it's almost credibility to you as a human being that, you see, it's not just me. These symptoms are identical, and this is real, and it's not just a psychological thing. I don't know if you guys have experienced that or not.
Yeah, definitely. The mental aspects of this, I was literally losing my mind at times. There were points where I didn't even recognize being in my own home. I don't know how to explain that to anyone. I didn't recognize my wife or kids. People were talking to me that just, the words didn't make sense, like they were speaking a foreign language. And then you go into a doctor and trying to explain it to them when you don't have the words yourself. Even speaking for a long time, even today, it takes a significant amount of effort to form the words before they actually come out of my mouth. My wife can tell when it's getting bad because I'll start mumbling and I don't even notice it. Like it's so sneaky and slides in so secretly that it twists your brain to where you're not even thinking straight at all anymore. And then you add in the memory issues on top of all that. It's such a complex web to even form words to describe what's happening to yourself.
Following up on that, whether it's doctors, whether it's the general public, there's a term out there called invisible disabilities, and Lyme, for the most part, tends to fall under that, because while the things that Kelley and Joe are talking about are very visible, quite visible to somebody who's living with you, they're not visible to somebody who isn't living with you. So if I'm not out with friends for a few months, they might notice that I haven't showed up, but what people don't notice. We don't notice absences nearly as easy as what's right in front of our eyes. The days that I do show up, I show up because those are, Lyme. It's known that we have better and worse days. My good days have gotten less, or so-called good days have gotten less and less frequent. But occasionally I'll show up. Not as much now with COVID, of course, but kind of talking before that, I'd show up to hang out with friends or to go birding. I'm a birder. That's my main outdoor activity with friends, and I'd be talking okay. And what they don't see is, they get a 2 to 3 hour snapshot of me when I'm at my best. Mm-hmm. They don't see what that takes out of me. They don't see how much rest and prep I have to do beforehand to be able to do that. They don't see the struggle. Even now, nobody can see the struggle in my head, trying to keep myself alert, formulating sentences like Kelley was saying. And a doctor certainly isn't going to see that in a 15-minute visit. And if they see, there's a kind of a paradox. It's like if you're lucid and articulate enough to really explain to the doctor, to do a good job explaining what's going on, it's going to seem less like you're sick. You're going to appear more healthy. Whereas if you can't, then the doctor is less likely to understand what's going on or to try to understand what's going on with you. They're going to be much more likely to chalk it up to, as Kelley said, depression, anxiety, things like that. Personally, I've had a couple of really good doctors here in the Twin Cities that I was already established with. And I was already seeing them about, other issues like my head injury and other health problems. And I had developed a good enough rapport with them that they really took me seriously. And when it came to the Lyme disease, they didn't brush it off. They didn't go along with it. They didn't just completely go along with it either, but they didn't brush it off, and they didn't pretend to have some other explanation of what was going on. They knew that I do my research and that I know how to research. They knew that I don't come in and fake stuff. These doctors knew that. So I at least have had that. But I had to do all the detective work on my own. As far as Kelley said, my diagnosis was also clinical, based on symptoms, based on ruling out other conditions, based on past exposure to ticks, and in many cases, that's the only kind of diagnosis you can get. There was a study, it was a meta study, which is a study of other studies. It was a kind of a review of 6 different studies on the standard Lyme test. It's the only test insurance companies will pay for, and it's a combination of the Western blot and the ELISA. They call it a 2-tiered test. That review study of these 6 other studies of that test found that it had roughly a 50% false negative rate, which means that 50% of the time, if you have Lyme, it's not going to detect it. Basically, if you go in there with Lyme and they give you that test, you might as well flip a coin as to whether it's going to detect your Lyme or not. And that test is 25 years old. Other tests have been developed by independent researchers and presented to the CDC. And the CDC has refused to allow them to go to market. This happened in 2010. It resulted in a $56 million lawsuit from the person who developed the test. He argued that the CDC had agreed to, contracted with him to release the test. They later reneged on that contract. The lawsuit ultimately failed because they said the independent doctor wasn't able to sufficiently prove that the CDC had fully committed. These are my words. I'm not sure I'm getting this correct, but the CDC had fully committed to releasing the test. Now, if that's true, fine, but that still leaves the question: why on earth wouldn't the CDC release this test? It had a 99% accuracy over this 25-year-old test that's been shown in published studies to have a 50% false negative rate. And there's a reason for that. It's because this old test tests antibody presence, which is a terribly unreliable way of testing for Lyme disease, even in the acute stage, because it's well known that in published literature, it can take the body up to 2 weeks to mount a sufficient antibody response to the pathogen. so that it will actually show up in the test. And that's only part of the reason. That's not the full story. This new test was a more direct test. It didn't test for antibodies. I forget the details, but it reputedly had something like a 99% hit rate, and the CDC didn't release it. Now, whether they breached contract or not, even if they didn't breach contract, it still leaves you wondering, why wouldn't they release this test that has such a high hit rate when we're stuck with this 25-year-old test with a 50% false negative rate? And allegedly, from things I've read, I don't know for sure whether this is true, but I've heard that there are key players both in the CDC and in the IDSA, that's the Infectious Disease Society of America. I've read that there are people in decision making and in positions of power who have royalties in this old faulty test. If that's true, that could potentially explain why we're not seeing any better tests coming along or being authorized by the CDC.
You know, Peter, to follow up on that, you know, one thing about Lyme disease that I notice is that one of the things that's really hard. Number one, testing isn't real accurate. Number two, whether it's medical professionals or the public or anybody, a lot of people don't believe in Lyme disease. They don't believe it's real. Yet you have LLMDs, Lyme-literate MDs, who dedicate their profession to treating Lyme disease. Yet you have their colleagues who say, you know, chronic Lyme disease isn't even real. And then on top of it, you know, modern medicine does not have a good handle on Lyme disease.
No.
But you know, a lot of people, the way they get treated are non-traditional means. Homeopathic.
The research funds are incredibly small compared to other diseases. I wish I prepared a graphic on this because it's staggering. It's almost unbelievable how little funding it receives, and you compare it to other worthy causes like HIV and hepatitis, of course, but it receives per person. It's in the single digits as far as percent, probably a fraction of 1%, the amount of funding that some of these others receive.
So
I'm sorry, Jode. I just wanted to.
Yeah, no, and Peter, I'm glad you did chime in. You know, but you know, and to that point, it's like, okay, number one, how do you get treatment? Where do you go for treatment? Because you know, you might hear that somebody had really good luck at a homeopathic, but that's 5 people had real good results out of 200. So you go there, you spend all out-of-pocket dollars, you do it for 18 months, it doesn't work, and then you got to go somewhere else. And over time, it's hard because you lose faith. It seems like almost all the treatments for Lyme disease are out-of-pocket expense, and who can afford that? And it's out-of-pocket expense plus. The person that has Lyme disease oftentimes is out of work or can't work to capacity they used to work at. So there's just a lot of real challenges to it. Yet it's very, very real. And you know, there's a very high, guys. I think you can probably attest to this, because of Lyme disease and what it does to you neurologically, because of the lifestyle you have to live and all the ailments. There's a very high suicide rate amongst Lyme disease patients.
I've read that it's the number one leading cause of death among people with Lyme disease.
Yes.
And one other thing, just to follow up on that, is that, you know, you had mentioned that, you know, IGeneX as one of the kind of the best West Coast testing company. Just for listeners, just to lest there be any confusion, these are those tests require out of pocket. No insurance company covers them. So when I'm talking about this faulty 2-tiered test, that's the only test that any insurance company will cover. That's the only test that the CDC has approved to be covered. So there are better tests out there, and you can go through other companies, private companies like IGeneX, but you have to go out of pocket, and it is not cheap.
Well, Pete, at least your treatment down in Florida was all taken care of through insurance, right?
No, it was not.
You know, and we laughed about it, and we laughed about it before the show actually started when we first met. But, you know, it's like, from Lyme disease perspective, hardly anything is covered by insurance. And it's really between that, the impression people have of Lyme disease patients in some cases, the struggle that goes on with Lyme disease patients. The whole thing is really, really challenging.
So why is it so hard to get insurance to cover some of these things, and what can be done to change that?
Oh boy.
Well, I mean, first off, some of the medical community doesn't even acknowledge Lyme disease, chronic Lyme disease, as a real thing. That's one of the things. Secondly, quite frankly, I mean, insurance companies, as a rule, and no disrespect to anybody who works with insurance, but you can have the exact same protocol covered this year, and next year they'll cover 20% less.
Yeah.
The one sign of hope there is, I forget the full name because it's long, but there's a tick-borne disease panel. It's an official. It's only a couple of years old. I think the first meeting was in 2018, and formed. I believe. I forget. Some government agency called for the formation of this panel, and it does have a lot of Lyme literate medical doctors on it, and they're making recommendations to Congress and I think to the FDA and the CDC, and perhaps with time, this panel may start to make some inroads. There have been small increases in funding in Lyme the last couple of years, and there was a bill. I can't remember if it passed or not, at least proposed by a couple of members of the House, a bipartisan bill asking for greater funding for Lyme disease. And so awareness it's so late in the game, but it is increasing. It's increasing slowly, but it is increasing. That gives me some hope that in the coming years, research dollars towards Lyme might go up, and there may be increasing acceptance in the medical community. I think it probably will be slow, but I think we might already be starting to go in that direction.
When you get a more well-known disease or ailment, and let's just use a terrible one, cancer. But normally when you get cancer, they really have a fairly defined protocol that you follow for the treatment of whatever that kind of cancer is. When you get Lyme disease, it literally is all over the board. You get opinions, and you get really well-meaning people, coming up with this homeopathic or that naturopath or this physician, it's all literally all over the place. And there is no protocol. It's literally overwhelming, the number of treatments and the expense of those treatments. And then, to go to other states where, let's say, other than Minnesota, where there are different kind of treatments that are more readily accepted that are non-traditional. So if you go to an Arizona or a Florida or a California, let's say, boy, I tell you, you're talking about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for some of these treatments. It's like rolling the dice. And then, what makes me nervous is, I certainly would give everything I could for Leah's health. But when you see these companies marketing where they're retargeting you and you're getting all these ad pitches and stuff, it almost makes me wonder, what do you believe? Because we've tried many things that we thought would perhaps work, and we're optimistic, and they haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Let's shift gears just slightly and talk about what we're dealing with in addition to everything else, and that's COVID right now. How has the COVID situation affected each of you with your current health issues?
Well, I can just say for Leah, it actually she's pretty much kind of been home ridden anyway. We would go to a doctor's appointment once in a while. It's actually number one, it creates a lot of anxiety because obviously her immune system's jeopardized, so it creates a lot of anxiety. We're very worried that if she would get it. The other part, though, that's more of a positive is that there's many more options with healthcare to do televisits over the phone, over the video. That part of it's opened up, so that opens up a lot more health experts to her than would have been allowed a year ago, let's say.
Yeah, on my end, similar. I was already largely, if not mostly, homebound. able to get out less and less. And but it has still been tough, not, for instance, not even being able to have friends and family come over as often for visits. That's made it much more difficult. But again, with the availability of meeting my doctors just via video without having to drive in has made that a lot easier.
Well, and a lot of people are talking about avoiding hospitals right now. That's one of these side effects of COVID that people are talking about, is people are afraid to go to the doctor, go into these buildings, and people with other ailments could be affected negatively because of that, because they can't go see their caregiver. Are you experiencing that, Kelley, at all?
Yeah, even things like this digital conference thing. The reason I wanted my wife to come with is because things don't really sink in for me at all. I have to be face to face. It takes time, so I can ask questions over and over again. And I can't do that anymore because all my doctors have basically shut their practices down and only do video conferences now. So I was already on the road to just treating myself. We've exhausted all our funds. We can't do any special treatments anymore. Lyme literate doctors are very expensive and out of pocket. But I felt that between my wife having a nursing background and me slowly getting better, I mean, I am much, much better than where I was even a year ago, that we were just going to go ahead and self-treat for a while anyway, just to save up some money and just see how it goes. A lot of doctors can pile a lot on you in the way of treatments. It will become a full-time job. I was spending 8-9 hours a day taking different tinctures, different pills, going to a sauna, just taking hour-long soaks in the tub with Epsom salts. It was a full-time job treating it. And now when COVID first came and they pulled the children out of the school, my wife has to, she has to work still. She's keeping us all afloat. So I was our full-time caregiver for our children too, when I couldn't even take care of myself at that point. It was very, very scary in the beginning, not knowing my health issues and what this COVID could do to it, all the mystery behind it, and then having the kids on top of it was very scary. And now I think I've learned to just relax, stay home as much as possible, don't get too wound up about it. That extra anxiety will worsen your health state, especially when you're so fragile, like these people with Lyme disease. You've got to try and keep that positive mental aspect going in your life and in every direction you can. And COVID was not helping that.
COVID, what a mess. Joe,
Yeah.
what message would you give to people out there watching this right now? I mean, obviously you all would probably agree to try to tell people to take more preventative measures when they're walking through the woods, permethrin, whatever, check for ticks, all that good stuff. But aside from that, and this question really is for all of you guys, but Joe, you can start. If somebody says, man, what can I do? How can I help? Is there a way they can donate to somebody that's doing research, or is there any type of help people out there can offer?
I don't know the exact answer to where you could donate and what you could support. These other guys might have a better handle on that. I can tell you this, that I think one of the things is just being cognizant of Lyme disease. And you talk about, number one, preventative measures, very important. First, prevent it. Don't even get it. Secondly, just know that if you get a small tick on you or any one of your family members, if you have any kind of reaction to the point of a mosquito bite, it doesn't have to be a bullseye rash. You don't have to get all these formalized symptoms. If you think that you have something, go in and get doxycycline, I think it's called. But the antibiotic that takes care of Lyme, go in and get doxycycline immediately. And if your doctor won't give it to you, go to another doctor. But you need to get that as fast as you can. And like these gentlemen said, 2 to 4 weeks treatment, there's different perspectives on it, but just get it in your system that can be very effective if you take it right away to knock this thing out. But it doesn't have to be a bullseye. It can just be a little bit of almost like a little mosquito bite even. Just get it in your system. And then I think the other thing is, and know the hospital tests, like we said over and over, the hospital tests are very unreliable. So there are lots of other more better tests that really determine if you do have Lyme disease in your system, and other co-infections which can be just as bad. And then, on top of that, I think just having an understanding that Lyme disease is real, and giving empathy and encouragement to people that have Lyme disease and families that have Lyme disease. It's a real thing. We deal with it. You're going to hear, as time goes on, mark my words, you're going to hear that people with different types of ailments, more and more is going to come out how they really had Lyme disease all along.
Yep.
As Kelley said, Lyme disease is a great mimicker. It mimics over 100 different things. When you take antibiotics, everybody thinks, well, just take antibiotics. Can't you take IV antibiotics and knock it out? I'll tell you what happens. You can take IV antibiotics, and you can get extremely sick from that because it wears down your system. On top of that, your Lyme disease has the ability to morph in your system. So it can morph and hide so that when antibiotics are all gone, it can come back even stronger when it comes back to life. Yeah. So it's not easy to treat. So just be cognizant that there are a lot of misnomers out there when it comes to the actual disease.
Well, I know you brought up ALS at one point there, Kelley. Hasn't there been some links maybe to ALS and Lyme disease?
They very well could be the same thing. I try not to get too deep into the weeds on all that. My ability to retain information is pretty poor, but I've heard it enough to know that there is a link there, or a possible link.
I've read the same. Yeah.
MS.
Sorry, Kelley, go ahead. Just echoing that.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to just mention before I forget about it is, if you get bit, save that tick. It doesn't matter if it's a regular wood tick or a deer tick or any type of tick. Save that tick, because you can test those ticks with 99% accuracy for not just Lyme disease, but the co-infections. If you can figure out what exactly you are dealing with before you have to start dealing with it, you are light years ahead of the game. Because once it's in you and in your system, it's a guessing game until you find that perfect cocktail of lifestyle, diet, and treatments that will get you better. So save that tick. All you have to do is Google tick testing, and about 50 different businesses will pop up. There's places that'll do it for free. Save that tick, put it on a piece of tape. Because I don't think people really realize how small a nymph deer tick is. It is almost impossible to see with the naked eye. And that's all it takes. So if you get bit, do whatever you can to get it out whole. If it's burrowed in, you're going to have to cut it out. Go into a doctor, have them cut it out. Save that thing, send it in. You'll know within a couple days whether it was infected with any type of disease, and then you can get on that doxycycline and fight your doctor to get that doxycycline. There's a lot of doctors that will push back on that big time. And the way I've told my friends, I've had 4 friends go in with bullseyes this year, and the doctors say, here's 1 pill of doxycycline. What is 1 pill going to do? I said, get 3 to 6 weeks and ask your doctor what the side effects from just taking the doxycycline is going to be. It's not going to hurt you. There's no reason they should deny you that, I believe. Save those ticks.
Sure. That's great advice.
I'm curious too, guys. You one of the things you brought up, Kelley, which is really important, and Pete, you too, but diet. Are you guys on pretty strict diets?
Hardcore. I've lost 100 pounds in the last year and a half.
Oh my gosh.
Strictly diet.
But the diet you're on, the purpose, I don't think, is to lose weight. Isn't it a specific diet because of Lyme disease?
Yeah. The way I look at it is you want to do absolutely everything you can to have your body working for you. And across the board, diet is number 1. Once you realize that, and the diet can be very different for different people. We're all different genetics. You've got to experiment and find out what works for you. I was straight vegetarian for a year. And I'm a meat eater. I'd never eaten vegetables before this. I mean, very little unless they were with my meat. I was willing to do it. Then I switched over to a carnivore diet, which is the exact opposite. It was straight meat and fat. And I did that against my doctor's wishes, but out of desperation to try something. And that's when everything changed for me. And I'm not recommending anyone else do it. I did it for myself, but I think it was those healthy fats, getting back and getting my brain working again. At least that's the research I did, is that those fats will really help brain activity. And I would say within 3 weeks of doing that, it was like the lights turned back on for me. And since then, I do like a mixture of healthy fats and healthy vegetables and a little bit of fruit.
Well, if it's
and avoid sugar.
If it's going to turn you into a vegetarian, now we know how serious the situation is.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to make jokes. Pete,
no.
What for somebody out there, is there some good research out there that you can recommend, or somebody that people could support, or some way we can help raise money for research out there?
There are some good organizations. The largest one and the most influential that I'm aware of is ILADS. That's an acronym. It stands for International Lyme and Associated Diseases. I'm blanking on the last part. They are doing a lot of research. They are educating physicians. So that is one excellent organization, ILADS. And then there is a newer charity, the Twin Cities Lyme Foundation. They are, so far, I really like them. What they do is you can, if you have Lyme, you can put your name in there and get on a waiting list. And they are funding people with Lyme who can't afford it to go in and get an initial and follow-up appointment with a Lyme literate medical doctor or naturopathic doctor. So they fund the first 2 visits. And I was able to get in and see a Lyme literate naturopathic doctor through them and get my first 2 visits funded. And that's a big deal. But I mean, because we're talking about all these out-of-pocket expenses, and Lyme doesn't only affect people who have a little bit extra money laying around. It can affect anybody, and there are a lot of people out there with Lyme disease who, from the get-go, do not have the enough extra money to do any kind of out-of-pocket treatment. So Twin Cities Lyme Foundation, that's another one a local one that I think is very good.
I agree.
All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate the time here on the show today. I wish you well, Pete and Kelley. I wish you guys health and hope you guys have better days ahead. And of course, Joe, wish your wife well for us. And guys, if there's anything else you would like people to know, forward it to me and I'll share it here with everything that we do at Sporting Journal Radio. But good luck with everything, and thanks for being on the show.
Yeah. Thanks, Brett.
Yep, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sporting Journal Radio is a division of Macaba LLC. If you've got a question, comment, or story idea for us, send us an email. Go to sportingjournalradio.com. While you're there, you can learn how to advertise on the show and visit our store for hats, hoodies, coffee mugs, and more. Go to sportingjournalradio.com.